Born and raised in Texas, I joined the Navy right out of high school. Went to BUD/S, graduated BUD/S, went to my SEAL team, was very lucky to have partaken in some early combat operations in my career, and then I worked extensively on the East Coast, but I finished up my tour in the Navy out on the West Coast at our training center in Coronado. I was very lucky. I stood on the shoulders of great men during that whole time, and when I left the Navy to move on to greener pastures, it took me to some faraway places. One of the things that I was very excited about being in the Navy was the work ethic, the training standards, the mindset that we had, and it's one of the key things that we bring to the public at large. For me, everything has to be measurable. Everything has to be based off of the standard. If it's any type of performance, we've got to be able to see that we're getting better. And that's how I've lived my life for as long as I can remember. And that's what we try to do within our training company. And, you know, it's extremely successful for a lot of reasons. Many people are not familiar with standards. Standards in the industry or, you know, at large are severely lacking. Most of the time, qualification is referenced as training, when all it is you going out there and punching holes in papers. You're never going to be able to find your limits if you're not willing to fail. And failure is a part of this. I cannot tell you how many times, both as a student and as an instructor in the Navy, that I saw failure firsthand. But I also watched other people fail. And I didn't want to fail, believe me. That's the worst thing that I want to do is be a failure or fail my teammates. One of the things that we talk about in our community is get comfortable being uncomfortable. If you can push the envelope and fail here and there, you're eventually going to find your left and right limits, which is so incredibly important to everybody. You know, my job was very simple, was to find, fix, and finish the enemy. And we could do that a lot of ways. You know, we could drop bombs on them, we could launch artillery at them, but, you know, one of the most basic ways is to shoot them and kill them. So for me, in my operational experience and after my operational experience, one of the most important things was my proficiency as a shooter. But actions on the target generally came down to shooting people. So to me, it was simple: be the best shooter you can possibly be. That was how I, you know, recognized my my lethality, my proficiency as a SEAL. What can I do to best protect our country? I used to think that it was, you know, being operational and going down range and shooting bad guys. And truthfully, of course, I would love to do that. But I also realize that if I can take the knowledge that I've got and pass that down to more people and multiply that and multiply that and multiply that, well, then we're going to have a better chance at protecting our homeland. There's these 4 concentric rings of security, if you will. And the first one is our U.S. military, the greatest fighting force to ever grace this planet. Their job is simple: to find our country's enemies, to go where they are, and to kill them. And they do a fantastic job. I'm privileged and honored to have been a part of that. When I tell people that that's one of the first steps in protecting our homeland, is finding these people that want to kill us and do harm to us and taking them out before they can. The second ring is our armed law enforcement. And again, I've been very fortunate to work with so many law enforcement officers from across the world. And it makes you appreciate what you have, because many of those officers internationally are not armed. And it's a surprise. Growing up knowing nothing different than an armed police officer and seeing an unarmed police officer, it's strange. And one of the things that we've learned firsthand just recently is that an armed good guy confronting an armed bad guy is a good way to stop that very quickly. Third concentric ring is our off-duty officers. So just because they leave work and they go home and they put on civilian clothes, they're still responsible for their own personal safety as well as their family safety. An off-duty officer is a force to be reckoned with. Not only is he caring for his own personal defense and his family's personal defense, but he's also there from a public point of view. And I know many officers off duty that have made a difference during a crisis, if you will, simply because they took a stand and they got involved. The last concentric ring is the private citizen exercising their constitutional right to bear arms. In this case, the concealed carry. That is, again, a huge one. And the thing about the last two concentric rings is they are the ones that are the untangibles. Bad guys can plan for a uniformed response. It's not rocket science. They can figure that out and they can come up with their own contingencies. But concealed is a different story. And the more concealed carriers we have, whether they're off-duty officers or private citizens, the better off we're going to be. Because the bad guys eventually are going to figure out that they can't risk it. They can't spend all the time and energy and resources to try to come here and do bad things, only to be tripped up by somebody that they walk into who's carrying concealed, whether it's an off-duty officer or a private citizen. So to me, those last two are so important. And the hard part about it is communicating that and getting that across to people. There's a fair amount of officers that don't carry off-duty, and that's a personal choice. But if more people did, we'd create that polite society, the armed society. And I will tell you right now, just as sure as I'm sitting here smoking the cigar, the bad guys will have to factor that in. And eventually, they're going to realize that it's not worth it. It's too great a risk because they can't predict it. They can't quantify it. There's no, it's an untangible. And when it's an untangible like that, it's going to be too hard to predict. And that's where mission failures are going to come from. And it's going to take one or two events like that. And unfortunately, good people may die as a result, but it'll take one or two of those events completely changes the landscape. I firmly believe that. When we try to figure out our purpose, why we're doing this, I guess the best thing that I can come up with is to ensure that our way of life is secure for our children's. I think President Reagan said it best when he said that freedom is no more than one generation away from extinction. It's our job to ensure that that freedom is passed to the next generation and to teach that next generation to do the same thing, to pass it along to future generations. Because one thing that is a certainty is that freedom is not free, that it will cost several lives, and we have to figure out if our way of life is worth it.